It started on a Thursday. Not a special Thursday, not a birthday or holiday. Just one of those in-between days, when the sky feels too pale to notice and the wind makes the leaves scrape like whispers along the sidewalk. Micah was 11. He was small for his age, the kind of kid who walked with his eyes on the ground, not out of shyness exactly, but out of habit. His mom worked long hours at the diner just off Main Street, so Micah walked home by himself most afternoons. He'd cut through the park to avoid the busier roads, past the old fountain, past the benches that curved like parentheses around the bakery. And that's where he saw him. The man. Same bench, same time. Every Thursday. Gray beard, clean button-down, khaki pants worn at the knees. He wasn't like the others Micah had seen near the gas station or sleeping behind the laundromat. He sat with his back straight, hands folded, like he was waiting for someone who was always late. Micah started noticing the details, the way the man looked around before he sat, like making sure he wasn't intruding. The careful way he brushed crumbs off the bench before he left. He wasn't a ghost, but he moved like someone who didn't want to take up too much space in the world. He'd sometimes trace patterns into the bench with his finger. Quiet circles, crosses, half moons, like he was remembering something that lived in his hands, but not in his words. Once, Micah spotted a scrap of paper on the ground after the man had gone, folded neatly. A list of 3 things written in tidy, slanted print. Shoe polish, 2 AA batteries, lemon cough drops. There was no bag, no cart, no suitcase. Just that little list. Micah stared at it a long time before slipping it into his backpack. He never mentioned it, but he kept it tucked in the front pocket for weeks. Each day after that, Micah passed him without a word, just a glance, just a wondering, until the day he didn't. Something about the steam curling through the bakery door, the soft glow from the window, and the way the man looked up, just briefly, felt different that morning. Like a small moment asking to be noticed. It had rained that morning, the kind of rain that clears everything out. The sidewalk still held puddles, and the bakery smelled like cinnamon and soap. Micah had a few dollars in his pocket, tip money Delia had given him for helping roll silverware the night before. He stepped inside the bakery. "Just a half loaf of the sourdough," he told the woman at the counter. It was his mom's favorite, the kind she'd bring home when tips were good and the sky wasn't so gray. It felt like the right kind of bread for someone who might need comfort, too. "You got someone to share it with?" she asked, smiling. Micah hesitated. "Yeah, I think so." He held the paper-wrapped loaf close as he walked out. The steam from it curled through the paper like breath. The man was there, just like always. Same bench, same stillness. Micah slowed. "Hi," he said. The man looked up, blinking slowly, like someone who'd forgotten how to expect anything. His voice, when it came, was low and careful. "Well, hello." Micah stood in front of him, unsure of what to say next, so he held out the loaf with both hands. "I thought maybe you were waiting for lunch." A smile tugged at the man's cheek, not the wide kind, but the kind that lives in the eyes. "You always bring bread to strangers?" "No," Micah said. "Just you." The man chuckled. "Lucky me." He took the loaf gently, as if it might break. Then, after a pause, he tore it in half and handed one side back. "We'll share it then." Micah sat beside him. They didn't talk much that first time. Just ate. Just watched the breeze carry dry leaves across the fountain ledge. But Micah noticed the way the man closed his eyes with the first bite. Not like someone who was starving, but someone who hadn't been offered anything warm in a while. Before Micah left, the man reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A small wooden keychain with the letter M carved in the middle. "My name's Nash," he said, placing it in Micah's hand. "This used to mean something to someone. I don't know why I held on to it, but maybe it's just happenstance. Thought maybe you'd like it. M's a good letter either way." Micah looked at it, then back at the man. Thanks. He walked home slower than usual that day. That night, he fell asleep with the keychain in his palm. When Delia saw the wooden M, her brow furrowed. "Where'd you get that?" she asked. Micah hesitated. "From a man at the park. I gave him some bread." Delia froze mid-step. "What man?" "He's just an old guy. I think he lives around there. He was nice." Delia's eyes clouded. "You can't talk to strangers, Micah, especially not grown men sitting alone in parks. I don't care how nice he seemed." Micah bristled. "He wasn't doing anything weird. He just sat there. I gave him bread and we talked. That's all." Delia looked down at the keychain again. "I've seen this before," she said softly. "Years ago." But she shook it off. "No more visits. You hear me?" Micah nodded. Mostly. But something in her voice didn't sound like anger. It sounded like memory. And Micah, being who he was, paid attention to that kind of thing. That night, he watched her more carefully. The way she opened the cabinet slowly before grabbing a tea bag. How long she stood at the sink without turning the water on. She wasn't afraid. She was remembering something. Or someone. Later, as she tucked him in, she lingered longer than usual. Ran her fingers through his hair. Whispered, "Good night, love bug," like she hadn't in a while. Micah didn't say anything, but he didn't let go of the keychain either. The next Thursday, Micah lingered near the park after school, keeping to the far sidewalk. And there he was. Nash. Same bench. No bread this time. Just his hands folded, his gaze steady on nothing in particular. Micah wanted to wave, but didn't. He walked on. But he came back the week after that. And the next one. Sometimes with bread, sometimes with a thermos of tea, once with a paperback mystery novel that Nash politely declined, always with questions. "What's the best thing you ever built? Do you have a favorite color? Do you miss anyone?" Nash answered when he felt like it. Other times he'd just hum low in his throat and say, "That's a good question, kid." They had their rhythms. Nash would lean back, one arm draped across the bench. Micah would swing his legs beneath him. A pair of squirrels became regulars, too, one bold enough to sniff at Micah's shoe. He never asked Micah for anything, never followed him, never said a word that felt out of place. Just sat, received, and gave in equal measure. Shared silences, warm bread, honest questions and half-answers. Micah offered curiosity and quiet company. Nash gave patience, presence, and space to wonder. Micah liked that about him. He liked how quiet could be safe. How a grown-up could listen without interrupting, without correcting. Once, after a long pause, Nash had said, "You know, sometimes I think we're all just trying to be remembered by someone." Micah hadn't replied, but he'd thought about it for days. Another time, Nash had asked, "You think your mom would like lilies?" Micah blinked. "She likes tulips better." Nash smiled. Figured she'd like something that keeps trying to come back. One evening, Delia found the keychain in Micah's coat pocket again. She picked it up, turned it over in her palm. A little worn now, still smooth. She sat at the kitchen table long after Micah went to bed, stirring her tea without sipping. Eventually, she pulled out an old shoebox from the hall closet, the one she hadn't opened in years. Inside, faded photos. One showed a younger version of herself standing in front of a half-built birdhouse, beaming. Behind her, a man with a thick mustache and a warm smile held a hammer in one hand and a saw in the other. "Handyman Nash," the caption read in her scratchy teenage handwriting. She pressed her lips together, whispered something she hadn't in a long time. "Oh, my word." Back at the park, on a Thursday that threatened drizzle, Micah arrived with an extra scarf in his backpack. He handed it to Nash before even sitting. "My mom says I can't talk to you anymore." Nash nodded slowly, eyes soft. "She's a smart woman." She said strangers aren't safe. Most aren't. But you're not a stranger anymore. Nash didn't respond. Instead, he pulled something else from his coat. An old photograph, folded at the corners, faded with time. A girl stood in front of a diner, holding a birthday cupcake. Behind her, a small wooden birdhouse hung from the porch beam. I built that, Nash said. It was the first thing I gave someone that felt like it mattered. Micah stared. That's my mom. I thought it might be. End of part 1. Sometimes the most beautiful turnarounds begin with the quietest repairs. A loaf of bread offered without expectation, a weathered keychain passed between hands, a memory quietly unlocking a door long shut. Stay with us for part 2, where grace meets imperfection and healing takes its first real steps. Part 2, The Stranger. My mother knew. Delia didn't say anything to Micah that next morning. Not about the keychain, not about the shoebox of photos she hadn't touched in years. Not about the man who once built her a birdhouse with scrap wood and a kind heart. But her silence held weight, and Micah could feel it in the air between them, like a letter left on the counter, unopened but heavy with meaning. She moved slower that day. Not in a tired way, but carefully, thoughtfully. And when she tucked Micah's lunch into his backpack, she added a note, something she hadn't done since 2nd grade. He didn't open it until lunchtime. Just a folded napkin with 5 words in her handwriting. Sometimes kindness comes full circle. Micah didn't know exactly what it meant, but he folded it again, carefully, and put it in his pocket beside the list he'd found on the sidewalk weeks ago. That afternoon, he walked a little faster through the park. Nash wasn't on the bench. For the first time in months, the seat was empty. Micah sat anyway. He waited. He watched the squirrels, the wind, the way the light shifted through the leaves like a memory passing overhead. But Nash didn't come. He didn't come the next day either. Or the next. Micah asked around, quietly. The bakery lady shook her head. A man sweeping outside the hardware store said he hadn't seen him. Even the librarian, who sometimes smiled at Nash when he passed the window, hadn't noticed him all week. It was strange how someone could be everywhere and invisible all at once. Micah told Delia at dinner. She didn't answer at first, just stared at her plate like it might say something. Then she whispered, I remember when he disappeared the first time. Micah looked up. I was 17. He used to fix things all over town. Porches, shutters, steps that creaked. Everyone trusted him. He didn't talk much, but he remembered birthdays. One year my dad forgot mine. Nash brought me a cupcake and built me a birdhouse. Just showed up with it, like it was nothing. Micah waited. Then one day he was just gone. Why? Delia shrugged. No one really knew. Some people thought he left because his son moved away. Others thought maybe something happened. I think he just stopped believing he was needed. She paused, eyes far away. He always seemed to carry invisible weights, things he never talked about. But you could see it in his shoulders, like he was bracing for something, even when things were good. That night, Delia stayed up late again. This time, she wasn't quiet. Micah could hear the soft clang of pans, the hum of the fridge, the sound of her starting a letter, tearing it up, and starting over. He peeked around the kitchen doorway once and saw her rubbing her hands together as if they were cold, or as if she were holding something invisible. What Micah didn't know was that Delia had pulled out an old letter of her own that night, a letter Nash had once left for her tucked inside that very birdhouse, the one from the photo, barely legible now with time and water spots. She held it like something sacred and fragile. And for the first time in years, she let herself remember what it felt like to be seen. Not as someone to be fixed, but as someone worth showing up for. The next morning, she packed 2 lunches. One in Micah's backpack, with a note in it. The other in a paper bag with a napkin folded neatly on top. The note in the lunch bag had something extra this time, a small map Delia had drawn from memory. Just a few scribbled landmarks and a circle behind the hardware store. No words, just the outline of a place long forgotten by most. Micah recognized the place. Delia had mentioned it once, years ago, as a place she used to sneak off to when she needed to cry where no one could hear her. He knew where to go. It wasn't the bench. It wasn't the park. It was behind the old hardware store, where the delivery trucks used to unload. There was a shed there, half collapsed on one side, with just enough shelter to keep someone dry. Nash was there, sitting on a bucket, sharpening a pencil with a pocket knife. His coat looked heavier. His eyes looked older. A folded tarp leaned against the wall, and beside him was a bag full of what looked like old tools and pieces of scrap wood, his entire life packed into items that could be carried. Micah stepped into view and held out the lunch. "Mom said to bring this." Nash looked up slowly. His eyes didn't shine, but they softened. "She remembered me?" Nash asked. "She never forgot," said Micah. Nash turned the bag over in his hands like it was made of something more delicate than paper. "She was a kind kid," he said quietly. "Quiet, like you. But she had fire, the kind that warmed, not burned." They sat on crates that afternoon. Nash talked more than usual. Told Micah about the first time he used a hammer, how he once carved a tiny boat that floated all the way down the creek, how he had a son who looked a little like Micah but laughed a lot louder. His name had been Toby. They used to build towers from cereal boxes and knock them down with rubber bands. Nash paused often between stories, like he was unsure whether it was safe to share so much. "Did you build stuff with him too?" Micah asked. Nash nodded. "That was our thing. He'd gather bottle caps, scraps, junk, and we'd turn it into treasure. He thought everything could be repurposed. Maybe he got that from me." "What happened?" Nash stared off past the shed's rusted roof. "I chose work when I should have chosen him. There's a kind of silence that grows between people when they stop believing they're worth each other's time. By the time I noticed, the silence had roots. It had crept in slow, like ivy across a wall, wrapping around the laughter, the dinners we kept promising to have, the stories we stopped telling. At first, it was just missed calls or short answers. Then birthdays passed unnoticed, achievements unshared, and still, I thought we had time. But silence doesn't need much. It just needs space. And I gave it that. By the time I realized what was happening, that quiet had settled into the foundation. It wasn't just distance. It was absence, grown thick and deep. Micah didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He just passed Nash an oatmeal cookie and changed the subject to wood grain. That became the new rhythm. Not every day, but often enough to feel like healing. Micah's walk through town became a thread pulling a story back together. A story frayed at the edges, but still strong. A story that had been left untended too long, but hadn't fallen apart completely. They shared bits of lunch, stories, silences that weren't uncomfortable anymore. And something in Nash began to shift. He stood a little straighter, talked a little more, even started sketching again. Nothing big, just pencil outlines of things he remembered building. A bench, a porch swing, a small footbridge over a stream. Delia never asked for details. But every time Micah came home with the lunch bag empty, she nodded like something was settling back into place. She began humming again while washing dishes. She started leaving the porch light on, even when she knew Micah was already inside. One night, she pulled the birdhouse out of the garage. It was dusty, a little broken, but still beautiful. She set it on the kitchen table and stared at it while her tea steeped. "Do you think he could fix this?" she asked. Micah didn't answer with words. He just smiled. The kind of smile that carries history, hope, and a quiet knowing. He wasn't just answering her question about the birdhouse, he was answering everything underneath it. The memories, the pain, the possibility. His smile said, yes, he remembers. And yes, maybe things can be made new again. And so, the next time he visited Nash, the birdhouse came with him, Nash held it like an artifact. "I remember this wood," he said, running his fingers over the grain. "It came from the tree that fell near the church." Micah watched him closely. "Will you fix it?" Nash smiled, a small, almost mischievous smile that tugged at the corners of his weathered face. "Only if she paints it." He said it not as a condition, but as an invitation, a way of asking her to be part of the restoration, to touch the past with her present. He could fix the wood, patch the cracks, steady the foundation. But the colors? That was hers to choose. The same way she once chose to see hope where there was heartbreak. To him, it wasn't just about the birdhouse. It was about rebuilding something together. Micah nodded. "Deal." That week, something shifted. Nash walked with Micah for the first time, not all the way home, just to the edge of the park. They stopped outside the diner. Delia was wiping down tables inside, her face lit by the amber glow of the overhead bulbs. "She looks tired," Nash said gently. "She always looks like that," Micah replied. "But she still smiles when customers leave big tips." Nash nodded. "She used to smile with her whole face. You could see it in her shoulders." "Maybe she just needs time," Micah said. Nash looked at him, one brow raised. "You sound older than 11. Micah grinned. "I've had practice." That evening, something unexpected happened. Nash sat on the bench again, first time in weeks, and Delia passed through the park. Not fast, not on accident. She walked right up to him. "I'm not mad," she said. "Not about you being gone, not about the silence, not even about the years in between. I've learned that sometimes people disappear because they don't know how to stay, because staying feels heavier than leaving. But I also know that coming back, that takes something rare." "I know," Nash replied. "I was just surprised and sad. You meant something to me. And then you vanished." "I was ashamed," he said, "of what I couldn't fix, of the things I broke and the people I let down. I thought if I stayed away, maybe I could outrun the sound of what I ruined, the creak in the porch I never came back to fix, the birthday I missed, the silence I let grow between me and the people who once trusted me. I was supposed to be the one who knew how to hold things together, but I didn't. Not when it counted." Delia's eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. "We all leave something broken behind." Nash nodded. "But sometimes if you're lucky, you get a second shot." Delia looked at the birdhouse in his lap. "You'll need paint," she said. "I was hoping you'd say that." End of part 2. Sometimes restoration doesn't come in thunderclaps or second chances shouted from rooftops. Sometimes it begins with a lunch bag, a memory, and the hands that once built now rebuilding what time tried to take. Join us now for part 3, where home is redefined and belonging finds a place to land. Part 3. Home isn't always a place. The following Thursday, Micah showed up at the diner just as Delia was finishing her morning shift. He wasn't just there for a snack. He had a plan. "Mom," he said casually, "you know that old workshop behind our building? The one that's full of boxes and broken stuff?" Delia glanced at him, already wary. "The one you're not supposed to be climbing around in?" Micah grinned. "I wasn't climbing, I was observing." She crossed her arms. "Micah." He raised his hands in surrender. Okay. But seriously, could we clean it out? I mean, it's just sitting there." Delia narrowed her eyes. "Why?" Micah shrugged, suddenly more serious. "Because maybe someone needs it more than the spiders do. Someone who knows how to fix things. Someone who could use a fresh start." Delia stared at him for a long beat, her face unreadable. Then she said softly, "You mean Mr. Nash?" Micah nodded. A long silence passed between them. Finally, Delia said, "All right, Let's see what we can do. 2 days later, Nash was moving into the shed. Delia helped clear out the cobwebs, and Micah swept the dust into piles while Nash silently sorted his tools. It wasn't much, just a bed, a bench, a shelf, a single overhead bulb, but it was more than he'd had in a long time. It was his. In return, Nash began to fix things around the apartment building, without being asked. A wobbly stair railing, a sticky gate, the busted lock on the laundry room door. He quietly took care of them all. Delia's landlord noticed, and while he didn't say much, he did drop off a box of new light bulbs one morning with a note. "Thanks for your help." The shed quickly became more than a space. It became a sanctuary. People started to notice, not just the repairs, but the way Nash carried himself. Quiet, respectful, steady. There was something grounding about him, something trustworthy. Word spread quietly. First, the bakery owner, who'd seen Nash fiddling with crates outside, asked if he could help repair some broken delivery bins. Then a neighbor, watching from her porch, came over to ask if he might look at a leaky faucet. Before long, Nash had a handful of part-time handyman jobs, all paid in cash and kindness. Delia's manager noticed too. After Nash repaired a swinging kitchen door that had been annoying staff for months, he offered Nash a part-time position at the diner as their go-to fix-it man. Broken hinges, sticky drawers, loose tiles. Nash handled it all with calm precision. And with each task, something else was being mended. Not just fences and floorboards, but the invisible gaps between hearts. Micah started calling him Mr. N. Not quite Dad, not quite Grandpa, but something just as real. It stuck. And Nash didn't correct him. Mr. Nash began to carry himself differently. Not with pride, exactly, but with quiet steadiness. He trimmed his beard. He showed up early. He didn't speak more than needed, but his presence spoke volumes. On some days, he helped wipe tables inside the diner when things got busy, exchanging nods and quiet smiles with staff who now welcomed him like family. One slow afternoon, Delia noticed Nash hunched over a paper bag during his break. Not just eating, but sketching something in the margins of the newspaper. She leaned over. "You draw?" she asked. He looked up, a little sheepish. "Blueprints. Used to. I was a contractor. Before everything." "Before your son?" she asked gently. Nash paused, nodding. He was 21, bright, strong, came with me to the site that day, said he wanted to learn the family trade. A beam gave way. I should have. He drew in a breath. It was an accident, but I still feel like it's my fault. He stopped. Delia didn't press. That kind of loss doesn't fix, he added after a beat. It carves out a hollow space that never really fills. But maybe, just maybe, something good can grow around it. Not to replace what was lost, but to honor it. To keep it from being the end of the story. Delia understood that kind of silence. The kind that doesn't need to be filled, just witnessed. She'd lived it herself, after her mother's passing, after the night her husband left, after so many mornings of showing up with a smile while everything inside her ached. She knew what it was to carry words you didn't have the strength to say, to be grateful when someone simply stayed close, without asking you to explain. Over the weeks, their shared routines deepened. Delia started leaving extra pastries in a bag for Nash to take home. Micah lingered longer at the tool shed, watching Nash work or asking questions. Nash began explaining things. How to measure a board, how to sand with the grain, how to steady your hand before making a cut. Micah listened, soaking it all in. It wasn't school. It wasn't tutoring. It was something softer, something quieter. The kind of learning that slips in through the cracks when no one's grading you, just someone trusting you to try. With every board measured, every nail hammered in, Micah seemed to find a little more steadiness in himself. It wasn't just about the tools. It was about being seen, being taught, being capable. And that made the boy stand taller, not just in posture but in confidence, in worth. One day, while reorganizing the brushes in a newly cleared kitchen drawer, Delia found her old sketch pad. The edges were curled, the pages yellowed, but the drawings, charcoal swirls of windows, doors, and light fixtures, were still hers. She brought them to the tool shed. "I used to draw," she said, handing Nash the pad. He flipped through the pages with careful fingers. "You still do. You just forgot for a while." A few days later, she came home to find a small wooden shelf resting just inside her doorway, quietly left, perfectly placed. It wasn't fancy, but it was smooth, sanded, and perfectly sized for her paintbrushes, crafted by someone who understood how to make something simple feel sacred. She recognized the careful handiwork immediately. Mr. Nash had built it. Not for praise, not for payment, but as a quiet gift. Tucked into the corner was a single note in his careful, blocky handwriting. "For what still needs coloring." She started painting again that weekend. Nothing grand, just little scenes, little joys, a windowsill, a rain-washed street, a pair of worn shoes by a door. She even painted the birdhouse in the tree outside their apartment, choosing soft teal and gold. It was the birdhouse from the photo, the one her mother had hung, the one with the letter. A letter Nash had once left for her tucked inside that very birdhouse, barely legible now with time and water spots. Around that time, the apartment manager stopped Delia in the hallway. He'd noticed how much Nash had done around the building and how tenants spoke of him with quiet respect. A studio apartment had recently become available, small, older, but warm and private. "Would your friend," the manager asked, "be willing to keep doing maintenance around here? In exchange for the place?" Delia brought the offer to Mr. Nash that evening. At first, he said nothing, just stood there holding the folded paper in his calloused hands, his eyes scanning the words like they were written in another language. Slowly, he sat down on the front step, elbows on his knees, the letter still in hand. After a long pause, he looked up, eyes glassy but proud. "If it means staying nearby," he said, voice low and rough, "I'd be honored. I know it's not charity. I'll earn every bit of it. But you should know." He cleared his throat, struggling. "I haven't had keys to a place of my own since before the accident. I forgot what it feels like to be trusted." He didn't cry, not exactly, but the unshed tears shone clear. And when Delia put a gentle hand on his shoulder, he didn't pull away. "It's more than a roof," he whispered. "It's a beginning." And just like that, Mr. Nash moved into the studio. Not because of pity, but because of purpose. Because someone saw the worth in what he gave and offered something lasting in return. He felt seen, trusted, valued. That spring, Micah's birthday came around. He never mentioned presents. But that didn't stop Delia and Nash from preparing a surprise of their own, something with deeper roots. They led him to the edge of the park where the bench had always been, but now, beside it, stood something new. A carved bench, warm, honey-colored wood, sanded smooth. It bore 3 simple words: seen, fed, loved. Micah sat down slowly, eyes wide. He looked at the letters, then up at them. "You made this?" "We all did," Nash said. "Each in our own way." Delia wrapped an arm around Micah's shoulders. "This bench doesn't belong to just one of us. It's a reminder of the meals we shared, the silences we sat through, the small moments that stitched us back together." Micah ran his hand over the engraving. "Do you think people will know what it means?" he asked. "Maybe not everyone," Delia said, "but the ones who need to, they will." He didn't say anything for a while, just leaned into the breeze and let it settle around him like peace. His heart full, his eyes soft, holding the kind of joy that doesn't need words. Later that night, The three of them sat under the soft yellow balcony light, sipping warm cider and watching the quiet street. The birdhouse hung nearby, glowing faintly in the dusk, and on the little shelf inside Delia's kitchen window sat her paintbrushes, each one standing tall like a tiny flag of return. Delia watched Nash, now smiling more freely, laugh as Micah recounted a joke from school. He had a way of listening now, really listening, not just to the words but to the pauses in between. She turned inward for a moment. Maybe healing isn't a finish line, she thought. Maybe it's just letting someone sit beside you for a while. Maybe it's not about moving on, but about letting others move in beside the pain, with hammers and words and second chances. Nash, sipping cider beside her, added his own reflection, softly, barely louder than the crickets. I thought I was invisible. Turns out I was just waiting to be seen by the right soul. That spring, the diner stayed open a little later. The tool shed light stayed on a little longer. Word kept spreading. One woman came by with a broken chair. Another asked for help hanging shelves. Nash always said yes, never loudly, never with fanfare, but with hands that now had purpose again. Micah once whispered to Delia after watching Nash help a young man fix his bicycle, "He doesn't even know he's teaching people how to hope." Delia nodded. Sometimes the best teachers don't stand at the front. They kneel beside what's broken. And every Thursday, after school and work, they shared bread. He didn't move in. He didn't become their father or their past or a burden to carry. He became part of the story they hadn't known they needed. And every Thursday, they still bring bread. Warm, broken, shared. A symbol of what it means to come back, to forgive, to rebuild, to belong. The end.